you at our house. So you didn't travel with these?
Well, no, I travel with these, but I have
You do?
desktop stands for them.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
so I don't have the arms and all that kind of stuff. But so this is the new home.
You are rocking this podcast, man.
Trying to,
it's amazing.
Well, thanks for coming by.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Okay. You were one of the early guests on the show. I don't know what number it was, but it was way back in the day.
Way back in the day, and you took off right away. I mean, it wasn't, you just soared right away.
It's cool. Here, actually, maybe turn that up a little bit so you're speaking into it. That's cool. Yeah, perfect. And I've had your lovely bow on twice.
Yeah.
And so you were due to come back and share with me.
Yay.
Congrats on the new book.
Thank you.
Your 5,000th new book. 5,000th book.
I told Dan, let's just take a little breather and sit out on the balcony and drink wine and not write for about a year.
And you're going to Switzerland next week, right?
Yeah.
So that's cool. Except Dan has to work, right? He's speaking at Davos.
Yeah, he's speaking at Davos.
That's crazy.
On happiness.
That's a pretty powerful situation,
isn't it?
Yeah.
I know. I'm nervous for him, but he's such a great speaker.
Does he get nervous when he speaks? He doesn't look like it. He looks like he looks like he's winging it and having a great time, and he just nails it every time.
Yeah, he practices a lot. He goes over his notes a lot, so he takes it seriously. But then once he's on, he doesn't get nervous.
Right. You can tell.
Yeah.
He's a pro.
I think he's born to do that. He loves, if you ever come to our house for dinner, he's the one who will immediately stand up in a chair and give a toast,
Yes, I've seen that firsthand.
Actually, you know that.
He knows how to hold court.
He does. He holds court. He should be giving speeches.
And we're all happy for him to do it.
Yeah, totally. I'm do it. I'll be the one on the sideline clapping. So...
Well, cool. It's great to have you here. I want to hear a little bit about what's going on in Santa Barbara because we've had these crazy mudslides. I know you're a little bit out of the orbit of where the real damage is happening, but what's it like to be there and see firsthand the devastation?
It is a shock to the soul to see this stuff manifest right in front of you. You're used to reading the paper and seeing things happen in the hills of Guatemala or, rural China, and to know that there's a mudslide happening in your town that just sucks people out of their houses and has killed, I think the count so far is 20 people. It's just...
That's crazy.
So horrible.
That's got to be the highest priced real estate, in almost the world.
Yeah.
That area.
By the way, I don't live in Montecito.
You live on the hillside, more in downtown Santa Barbara.
Yeah, we're exactly. We're more downtown. So, but we have friends who live in Montecito who've lost their homes and who have 5 feet of mud in their houses. And it just got real. And it's because the fire, which was the biggest fire, the Thomas Fire, the biggest fire in California history, happened in December. We never had fires in December. Fire season is the summertime. And so to have a December fire, to have that kind of heat and dry and wind in December and have a fire like that, and then coming close on the heels with all that rain.
Right.
It was just total.
It's all just
perfect
on
storm.
top, so ready to just slide down the hill.
Yeah.
It's so crazy. And your friend Oprah, basically opened up her home to become this staging area, right?
As Oprah does.
Only Oprah.
She does, and Ellen is up there, and,
That's right.
They've been so hospitable to the first responders. Everybody's the whole town has just come out with open arms and open hearts and how to help. But it's stunning. You don't get it until you see it. I mean, they're talking about cholera, because there's so much raw sewage and rotting bodies. There are animals that you forget that there are animal casualties as well. And so all of this is sort of rotting and decaying in the mud and poses a real continuing threat.
It's like a crazy third world problem.
Yeah. In Montecito and, California.
It doesn't seem possible, but...
I know. But you know what? Doesn't it appear that things that were never possible before are happening more and more?
I would say that's an understatement.
Yeah. I mean, the floods, you hear from a real estate agent, don't worry about that hill. It would take a 500-year flood to really...
that person would know.
Yeah. And it's those 500-year floods, those 100-year fires, they're happening sort of on a yearly basis now. And the chickens are coming home to roost, as it were.
Well, it's crazy times. I always, there's that kind of running joke on Twitter where somebody will say, remember that thing? And cite some insane event that occurred in current events and say, yeah, that was earlier this week, because we just crazy stuff happens. We move on. The news cycle moves on, and then we're on to the next, banana event.
We don't have time to digest it. I mean, I remember I was in a crazy relationship, just like insane relationship many, many, many years ago. And I remember while I was in it thinking, I don't even have time to digest what's going on a daily basis, because it's just such a shock to my soul, my heart. And it takes years to just digest one of these events. And like you said, now in current events, that what's happening topically, it's like day after day after day, you just you can't digest it all.
I know the acceleration of it is just, we're not wired for that, I don't think.
No, we're not. And yet here it is. So we have to wire ourselves.
It's showing no signs of slowing down either. No. I mean, I tweeted the other day, remember that whole UFO thing? Remember?
That's right.
Shouldn't we be talking about that a little bit more?
That's kind of major.
In any other time, we would be hold on, stop the presses.
I know.
These pilots saw what they believed to be a UFO. These guys with 19 years of flying experience. And we're just okay, well, that was yesterday.
I know, because something more serious and more insane, like nuclear war, I don't know, comes up.
Yeah, then the thing in Hawaii,
Yeah.
It's
I know.
Wow.
I know.
All right. Well, we have the veganist here, the original veganist, so we're going to talk about that kind of stuff. I love the new book. It's great.
Thank you.
I think it's timely, and it kind of hits, the way I thought of it is it really canvases all the major issues. It's almost like this synthesis of a lot of the works that are currently out there, including, I had Paul Shapiro in here a couple of weeks ago. His book has a lot of similarities to your book, Clean Protein, but you also hit on the issues that Garth hits on in Proteinaholic, and you cover the environmental concerns of Cowspiracy and the health concerns of How Not to Die and the works of Neil Bernard and What the Health, and you kind of compartmentalize it and put it all together in this one book that's very digestible, easy to read, and provides you with, a really practical, easy to follow roadmap for making these changes in your own life that will improve your health and are in the best interest of our planet at large.
Thank you. That's
done.
A great summary.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
How has the book tour been?
The book tour has been great. I mean, it's a fun thing to talk about protein because it's a national obsession, So as soon as someone knows you've written about protein, they have a bunch of questions, or they have a bunch of comments or stories of what they've been through, and when they shift, and so this is really this is kind of it's a buzzy conversation that is, I think, timely. But what with clean meat and with, just all the different kind of alternative meats and just with the blue zone stuff. So there's so many different kinds of proteins and so many questions around it. So it's been a really fun experience.
So let's define clean protein.
Yeah.
What is clean protein?
So protein comes in a package. It's like Harvard calls it a protein package. So you want to think about what comes along with that protein. There's lots of things that have protein. Yes, chicken has a lot of protein. Fish has a lot of protein. Beef has a lot of protein. But what comes along with it is you want to ask yourself, is there cholesterol that comes along with this protein? Is there a lot of saturated fat? Are there drug residues? Are there pathogens like E. coli, salmonella? Is the protein inflammatory to my body? And what does the raising and processing of this protein do to the land and to the water and to climate change? So these are all questions that we address in the book. And we talk about moving toward clean protein in a lot of the ways that people have moved toward clean energy. As a culture, we're pivoting toward clean energy because of a bunch of problems, land degradation, climate change, all that stuff that comes along with energy, oil, gas, things like that. So in the energy sector, we're moving hopefully more and more toward wind and solar. And in protein, it's the same thing. If we want to sustain our life on Earth, we have to pivot away from the way we are producing protein now toward a cleaner way.
Couldn't agree with you more. The protein obsession thing is quite something. It's certainly real. And it's kind of interesting how you track like where this all comes from. Like, how did we become so obsessed with protein, and what is that all about? But before, and I want to hear about that, before we even get into that though, I think it's sort of important to even talk about what protein is. You know, our mutual friend Ray Cronice, who you talk about in the book, you know, he sort of famously said, like, I wish that word didn't even exist because it causes so much confusion. Certainly protein is an important macronutrient. We need it to live. It's important for a million different reasons. But it creates so much confusion because it's such a loaded term. So when we're talking about protein, we're really talking about an assemblage of amino acids, right? 20 amino acids, 9 of which, the essential amino acids, are amino acids that our bodies cannot synthesize on their own, and thus we must get from our food. But instead of talking about protein, we should be talking about, like, how are we getting all of these amino acids, right? I mean, how do you think about it and talk about it?
Well, we talk about it, you know, I think people are worried, oh my God, I'm not going to get a complete protein if I'm just eating beans or if I'm just eating vegetables.
Explain what a complete protein is.
Complete protein is having all those amino acids. So your body needs all those amino acids, you know, to function properly. But the good news is everything in the vegetable kingdom, you know, beans, grains, vegetables, those amino acids are everywhere, scattered throughout all the foods that grow in the ground or on trees. Maybe not all of them in every single food, but if you are eating things, a diverse diet over the course of a day, a few days, even a week, you're having, you know, oatmeal for breakfast, you're having a, you know, lentil soup for lunch, you're getting all the amino acids you need. So I think a lot of people are really concerned that they're not going to get a complete protein, and they have to be very careful about food combining, and that myth has been debunked. You don't really have to worry about that. Right.
That idea that animal protein, well, let's talk about this a little bit more in depth. The idea that animal protein is a superior protein for many reasons, one of which being that it is complete, and protein derived from plants, vegetable protein, is inferior, because it's incomplete, and also there's this sense or idea that how we digest these proteins and then assemble them or put them to use in our bodies is somehow different based upon the source. So what did you learn in your exploration into this world of protein on that subject?
Yeah, they're like, for instance, beans are harder. You know, you're not going to be able to readily use the protein as much if you soak them or sprout them. It's
the bioavailability.
Yeah, the bioavailability is better when you sprout or soak them, but you get everything that you need. And as an athlete, you must know, it's like you eat a ton of food. It's like you eat giant plates of, you know, hearty whole grains and beans and vegetables and things like that. So you're getting a lot of it, and your body ends up getting what it needs. It's just like the air you breathe. You don't have to worry about how am I going to get the correct oxygen. You know, you breathe. If you're athletic or if you're very active, you're breathing deeply. You're going to take in as much as you need. Your body does that. Right.
That's certainly been my experience, you know, as somebody who's been eating this way for over 10 years at this point. Like the idea of building lean muscle mass, of you know, my body repairing itself in an expedited manner to, you know, train as hard as I train. It's just never been an issue.
Yeah.
You know, and I think there's this myth and this idea that, you know, if you're an athlete, you need more, and that more is better. You know, the recommended daily allowance, as you point out in the book, is about 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight, right? So in my case, that balances out to about, I don't know, somewhere between like around 70, 75 grams of protein a day. And I don't really count, but when I do pay attention to those sorts of things, I probably come in below that.
Yeah.
And I've read that the World Health Organization actually estimates it much lower.
Much lower. Yeah. I think they're being cautious when they're saying that, and they're kind of bowing to, you know, some concerns that people have. But no, you really don't need as much as you think you need. On average, probably, you know, 48 grams for women, 52, 54 grams for men. But depending on how athletic you are, how active you are, you easily get that without even trying. You easily get that kind of protein. So,
is there any studies or indication that you need more? I think if you're a pregnant woman, you probably need a little bit more. What about for kids? A lot of people who are interested in adopting a plant-based diet or going plant-based, like they worry about their growing children.
Yeah.
And I understand that. Like, I'm sympathetic to that. You know, it's easy to just kind of do what everyone, there's comfort in numbers, right? So it's just like, well, that seems risky. You know, everyone else is doing it this way. You know, just to be safe, like I'm going to make sure that they have eggs or whatever, because I don't want to step outside that paradigm. And then if something goes wrong, I'm the one who's, you know, to blame for that.
Yeah.
And I can understand that fear. So, you know, I know a zillion kids who have been raised vegan, plant-based since day one, and they're all thriving and fine. So I understand the mythical aspect of that, but I'm sympathetic to the concern of the average parents.
For sure. And that's why you want to talk to a doctor who's up on all the studies and who, you know, is not against this way of eating, but like Dr. Spock in his 7th edition and talks about.
Spock. I know. I was like, is that guy still alive?
He's not, but but that was the final edition that he gave his approval to, and he said it's so healthy for kids to eat a purely plant-based diet. And certainly Joel Fuhrman talks about this, Dr. Joel Fuhrman. And no, the research said even the dietary guidelines, which is so, you know, tilted toward the industry and meat and everything, even they said pregnant women, nursing mothers, children of all ages, it's totally fine to be plant-based. And by the way, the book isn't really a book about veganism or being plant-based or anything like that. It's really dissecting, you know, what kinds of issues come along with protein, so that the reader can make their own decision about what kind of protein they want to opt for. Obviously, we end up in the place that plant protein is healthier, you know, not only for you, but for the land, the water, the climate, everything. But yeah, it's. I think that the paradigm has to shift. I think when we look at how we're raising our kids now, kids are more overweight and even obese than ever. I mean, childhood kids are getting type 2 diabetes.
It's insane.
It used to be called adult onset diabetes, you know, and now it's like kids are getting type 2 diabetes at a very young age, and that is just, it's wrought with so many problems, you know, that go along with that. And so I think it's time to change the paradigm. I think it's great. Like, do we want to keep raising our kids the way they have historically been raised, so that they get addicted to this fatty taste, this very rich flavor of dairy and meat and stuff like that? I think it's a good thing that we're shaking things up.
Well, we have to. You know, we're facing this insane, you know, obesity crisis, like you said. Heart disease rates are through the roof. 1 out of every 3 people dies of heart disease. Diabetes, by 2050, something like 30% of Americans will be diabetic or pre-diabetic, type 2. These are the epidemics of our time. You know, it's absolute insanity. Yeah. And it's the food. And when we look at the food, you know, the biggest culprits, we have, you know, the animal products, we have the processed foods, we have the sugary foods, all of that. It's all bad. And we need to innovate ways of creating healthy foods that are palatable for people and are also kinder on, you know, on our planet and its precious dwindling resources. So if you've seen Cowspiracy, like, you understand what goes into generating these foods that we're obsessed with, and I would go so far as to say addicted to, and it's just not sustainable by any stretch of the imagination. And grass-fed's not going to cut it in terms of saving the planet. We need a new way forward, and the way forward is right in front of our faces. It's eating plant-based, and it is for those that aren't ready to make that leap, it is the innovations that we're seeing in this cultured meat world that is rapidly descending upon us, and very interesting.
And it's so exciting to see these new innovations, with clean meat, growing meat for cells from, so it's real animal flesh and sort of like what will be a brewery kind of a thing. But also the meat alternatives. And I'm a big fan of that. I'm not a purist. And I know a lot of people who are into super healthy ways of eating are kind of anti-veggie burger, sausage, meat crumbles, stuff like that. I'm a fan because they are far cleaner than the animal-based versions of the burger or sausage or chicken patty. So even though it's not as healthy as a bowl of rice and beans and kale, you're having sausage that has no cholesterol, that has very little saturated fat, that has no salmonella or E. coli or drug residues. It does not cause environmental havoc, and it didn't cause any suffering.
And they're getting better at making them taste good.
Yeah, they're so good. Oh my God, the Beyond Burger is beyond.
Yeah, I mean, and I enjoy these things from time to time. Like I am one of those more purist people.
You're a super athlete.
But I recognize their importance, and I think that they have a very very strong, legitimate place in this discussion, because I don't know, what are the statistics, like how many people in the world are vegan? Like, I don't know, 2% maybe?
Really,
I mean,
very
if
small.
that, it's got to be really small. And I think, this idea that we're all going to be struck vegan out of the generosity of our hearts, or, even in the interest of our own personal health, is just it's a pipe dream. I wish that would happen. And I advocate for people to think along those lines, but I also recognize the reality of the world that we're in and the ticking clock. It's like we don't have enough time to wage that war. We need to be able to provide people with super tasty alternatives that are more environmentally sustainable, better for our health, and the like. And they have to taste just as good, if not better, than what's available, or the war is lost.
That's right. And I think it was Victor Hugo who said, perfection is the enemy of the good. And I think a lot of people are perfectionists. They want to be super, healthy and pure. And that's just asking a lot for a lot of people who are just not interested in that. I'm from a small town in Georgia, Doraville, Georgia. And Doraville. Like that, I think it's Atlanta Rhythms section, that song, Doraville, touch country in the city. Doraville. That's where I'm from. Not a lot of vegans there. No, not a lot of vegans there. I'd still not a lot of vegans there. And so I went down and picked up my mom in Florida. She lives outside of Daytona, and we drove up to Atlanta. So it's about a 7-hour drive. And so I really got a reminder, of how hard it is to eat healthy in a lot of the country, in a lot of the world. We're lucky because we live in a big city and there's lots of options, and we're around people who are curious and entrepreneurs who are providing and everything. But in a lot of places, they have McDonald's and Denny's and Taco Bell, and that's it.
That's pretty much it, yeah.
And then they're doing their grocery shopping. So I'm all for, Kroger's carrying veggie burgers and veggie sausage, and, going to Taco Bell for a bean taco. We have to look for the better, and not hold out for perfection, and encourage people to just sort of lean forward.
Yeah, and Walmart and Costco are the two biggest organic retailers in the world. I don't know, in America.
That's amazing.
Them together. And so I think I agree with that. I think, a couple observations. First, we need to celebrate the small victories within the system. I think the idea that you're going to be this punk rocker who's going to just, want to blow up the system, and anybody who has anything to do with McDonald's is an evil person. It's like, you got to disrupt from within. Yeah. I've often said, like, if McDonald's asked me to come and speak, like, I would do that in a second.
Oh, for sure.
You need to get these people to understand what the future is about, and that it's in their best interest to, like, get on board with this plant-based movement, because that's where we're headed. Yeah. And it makes economic, capitalist sense for them to do so, because this is the shifting appetite of the millennials as they grow. Like, young people, they have a whole different view on this whole thing. Like, they're far more evolved than our generation when it comes to this stuff.
We're attached to our ways. I think that's a natural thing, that we grew up with certain foods, and we're attached to the way we think. And millennials, and Generation Z, I mean, they're kind of seeing climate change. They're seeing their parents getting sick or their grandparents getting sick. So yeah, things
and their
are
classmates
changing. Yeah, and that's right.
And they're seeing. They're also, they've been raised on the internet, and they have an inherent expectation of transparency that we weren't really raised on. Like, wait, you mean like we can't see like how that was made, and they're not going to tell us? Like, that doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
Whereas to us, it's just like, well, that's the way,
it's
that's
always
the way
been.
it is. You know what I mean? And I think on this other point of view, kind of going back to your hometown, is this idea of, you're getting outside your bubble, right?
Yeah.
And as much as I like to think that I'm a broad thinker, and I'm not just, sort of in my bubble, and I'm thinking about what the average person, has to contend with. Like, we're in a huge bubble here, and it's funny, like, when I go outside it and I'm like, oh yeah, like, wait, people still do that? They still eat that way? It's like, oh yeah. Like, I have to be reminded, just in an airport, when you see the line at McDonald's versus, the line at in the American Airlines terminal at LAX, they have the Real Food Daily. Yeah. Nobody's in line there. Everybody's at McDonald's or whatever.
I'm like getting one of everything for my flight just because.
Except it's so expensive.
Yeah.
I went to get a burrito there and like one other thing, and it was like $40. I was like, please, no, that doesn't work.
Seriously?
Yeah, it was crazy.
Oh, that's
I think the bottled water that I got with it was like $9.
But that's just the airport.
I know it's the airport.
Yeah.
But that's not helping the problem. You know what I mean?
Well, McDonald's is so artificially cheap. I mean, and it's just such a hit on the taste buds that people just love it, and.
Well, I think that, on this issue of the bubble, that's why I feel so strongly about doing this podcast and trying to put the best show out there, because it's able to reach people who live in places like that small town, and who don't have access to these kinds of ideas, or it's just not part of the daily conversation. Yeah. And they get to participate in that and kind of expand their horizons by virtue of what the internet has to offer,
and feel like they're part of a community. I think that's the great thing that you've created, is you've created a community. I mean, everywhere I go, people say, "Oh yeah, I heard you on the Ritual podcast." It's like, forget about I saw you on Ellen, but I heard you on the Ritual podcast. You've got this great community of people who feel like they're not alone. They're not isolated. They are with and among other people who are wanting to grow, wanting to expand their circle of care and concern. They want to do better for their bodies. They're creating the conversation. So you kick off all these conversations in, first this online community, this podcast community you've got, but then people take it back into their families. They talk to their friends about it, and it makes it's a ripple effect. It's really true.
Yeah,
You're dropping the stone in the pond, and it's rippling out there.
From this little studio here. It's funny because I get that when I travel and I interact with people when I get outside of LA, but I'm just here doing my thing, and I see the numbers and I'm like, oh wow, a lot of people are listening to this, but that's just an abstract concept, until I actually go out, I travel somewhere to give a talk, and then I get to actually meet people, and
people are coming out in droves.
It's meaningful. It's meaningful to me personally, and it's so great that it's able to have that kind of impact on
huge
people,
impact. Huge. And I think so much of it is that people don't want to feel socially isolated. This appeals to them, and it strikes, some sort of recognition like this is right. And I'm not crazy. I'm not a weirdo. I'm not like a radical person who's, an ideologue or whatever. I have all these other people who are thinking like me, who have curiosity like me, who want to do more for my body, want to do more for the planet. Like, I actually really care. And by the way, I'm not a tree-hugging, animal-loving.
No, you're not a hippie, Kathy.
I'm not a hippie. I mean... I lived in Woodstock.
Did you?
I did. I used to live in Woodstock, so I've got the hippie in me a teeny tiny bit. But when I moved to California, I had a girlfriend of mine.
A stiletto hippie.
Well, I had this friend. She walked into my closet. I had an apartment, and she said, "Show me your shoes." And I had 3 pairs of shoes. I had a pair of Doc Martens and a pair of Birkenstocks and like a pair of, I don't know, some kind of little black boot or something.
This must have been a very long time ago.
She was like, "Girl, I am taking you shopping. These shoes have got to go. You live in LA now." And I was like, "But I'm comfortable. They're so comfortable." And that's what we wore in Woodstock. I never thought about it. But I had to change up my game a little bit.
Like I have a hard time seeing that. That's not part of the picture, the mental image.
I will show you pictures,
your lifestyle.
Rich. You guys come over one night. I'll whip out the photo albums, and you will see. I was a bona fide hippie.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm good at adapting. So,
on this subject of protein, the number one question, obviously, for anybody is, where you get your protein. Oh, you're going to go plant-based, you're going to go vegan. Where are you going to get your protein? You can't get your protein, right? And kind of baked into that is this idea that plants don't have protein, that you're going to somehow wither and die. And what I'm interested in is what you found out in the process of writing this book about how we got to this place where that myth became the predominant sort of conventional wisdom about food, because it didn't just happen out of the blue. Like there are vested interests that benefit from us believing this.
Yeah, well, you hit the nail on the head. It's vested interest. I mean, there's an industry that is producing a product, and in order to sell that product, they have to sell a story, and the story is that you need this product, and that product is animal protein. It's animal foods. So there's a whole industry that markets this product called animal food. And there's a checkoff program where they take, maybe $5 off the head of every animal, every cow that's sold, and they have to plow that back into the marketing of this product. And that's like a government program. It's mandated. You have to do that as a producer. So,
and to put a pin in that just for a quick moment, when I had Neil Barnard on the podcast, he told the story just to kind of illustrate the checkoff program, that's why you see these ads for, like, I don't know if this is specifically correct, but like Pizza Hut with the cheese in the crust, or the Taco Bell burrito that has the super duper extra cheese or whatever. It's because there are actually government checkoff dollars that are being funneled towards these advertising agencies and these corporations to market these food products. So the government is actually in bed with the fast food industry, the animal agriculture industry, to push these products, and there's no uncertain terms about it.
And that makes you just kind of wake up and say, wow, there's no one really advocating for me. It's not the government. They're not advocating for me. I have to advocate for myself. I have to dig and figure out what is right, what seems right. And that's another thing they do, is they fund quote unquote science, studies, so that the studies show what they want it to show. And I'm sure, you've seen like studies, you can make it come out a lot of different ways depending on how you sort of structure it and, talk about it. And so that the results get so confusing. So the person who wants to understand about how much protein they need, or what they're missing, or is it safe or whatever, there's a lot of shoddy science out there, but there's also a lot of half-right science, and that's the most confusing, is when there's a kernel of truth, and so you say, oh yeah, that's true, I know that to be true because I read that somewhere else, but then the rest of it is kind of wonky. So it's just enough to muddy the waters and confuse the consumer, so that the consumer says, moderation. It's also confusing. One week they tell you one thing, another week they tell you something else. I'm watching these, medical shows. I'm reading all this stuff, and it's just so confusing. So, moderation. I'm just going to eat the way that I grew up eating. And that's a slippery slope, because moderation means different things to different people. And, certain kind of foods are addictive.
I wonder if somebody in like 1974 who was like going vegan, making that radical leap, because that would be kind of radical back then. if the response would be, where do you get your protein? Like, I don't know that would be the reaction because the culture was different back then.
Right.
They might have thought like, oh, you're going to be malnourished or you're going to be weak, but it wouldn't be where are you going to get your protein? Like that's a newer concept. And, it's interesting to kind of track back like how we got to that.
Isn't it
place.
Brilliant? They did such a good job.
Well, I think it's, I don't know this for a fact, and you and Bruce, we should mention.
Oh, my brilliant co-author, Bruce Friedrich.
Who's been on the podcast, who I'm going to have on again, who's, so eloquent and intelligent about all these matters.
Damn smart.
Yeah.
Damn smart.
He, I think my sense is that this all kind of came online in a big way with the explosion of like bodybuilding culture and Arnold Schwarzenegger, and when these bodybuilders in Venice Beach started to try to gorge on protein, and they were the first ones to kind of figure out what whey was, to go to these cheese producers and get that extract and like make these supplemental nutritional products out of what was essentially being thrown out by the dairy. Yeah, it was the waste.
Yeah.
And using like these acids to extract these curds to create this high, protein content food, which at the time tasted terrible.
Yeah.
And then then there was these documentaries, and you'd see these huge guys, and they're doing these shakes, and that kind of created a whole industry. When the dairy industry realized, oh, all the stuff we're throwing out, like we can make billions of dollars by reframing the discussion around what this is and convincing people that this is an elixir of health. And I think that was the birth of that was sort of the genesis of how we started to walk this path towards this obsession with protein and this idea that more is better and that we need, more than we think we need. And only to wake up to now you go to the grocery store and every food label has emblazoned on the front of it in giant, bold font, how many grams of protein every product has. And the implicit message behind that is that you need more.
Right. It is the group think. It is in the zeitgeist. And I think that's kind of where we have to meet people, because that is an obsession. So some people have said to me, Kathy, why are you even talking about protein? You just underscore, that it's a real thing that we should be thinking about, and it's not
that's
something.
What people want to know.
And that's the thing. That's what people are talking about. That's what they want to know. So I think we kind of have to meet the discussion where it is and respectfully address it. Respectfully answer all those concerned questions, because it's a real. I know when I was switching, I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do for calcium? And am I going to get enough iron? And where do I get my protein? That I wasn't trying to be obnoxious. I was really concerned because a doctor had said something to me. My mother was very concerned. Friends were sort of lecturing me about, the mistake that I was making. So I was asking these questions in earnest. And I think that it's tempting to sort of laugh it off with a joke and, say, oh, I eat children, to get my protein. But it's not funny to people. It's not, and it's not helpful. I mean, it's a real concern. And there's also, I think there's like what's the word? It's not a placebo, but if someone is moving away from animal protein and they're not eating well, if they're tired or they're sick or they're going to blame it on protein.
Right. It'll be the first thing they're going to.
Yeah. So I think it's actually really important that we talk about this, and we talk about it a lot, because there's a lot to counter. There's a lot of.
So when someone asks you, where do you get your protein, what do you say? Do you have a canned response, or do you take that on a case-by-case basis, depending on who you're talking to?
Depending on who I'm talking to, but the truth is pretty much always the truth. And I'm a big beans fan. My partner is Stan Buettner he's the founder of the Blue Zones, which is a study of the populations around the world where people live the longest and are the healthiest. And so
everybody listening knows who Dan is.
He said, well, I just love singing his praises. He's so brilliant. And so I'm with
He's dreamy.
He is dreamy. And you know what the best part about him is that he makes the best damn beans you've ever had in your life. This man has recipes from all over the world on how to make beans taste good. So, and he says that the single best thing you can do for your health and to promote longevity is to add in at least a cup of beans a day. So I'm a big fan of beans. You know, lentils, 1 cup of lentils, which is like an inch basically in a measuring cup, has 18 grams of protein, and 1 egg only has 6 grams of protein. And most people eat eggs because they're thinking, oh, I need my protein. Mm-hmm. But there's not a lot of protein there. There's roughly half as in the yolk and half is in the white. But so with 1 cup of lentils, you're getting 18 grams, plus you're getting tons of healthy fiber and iron and antioxidants, and you're feeling full because of all the fiber, and you're not getting all that cholesterol. So it's just a matter of, you know, talking about where we get our protein. So that's my favorite. I eat hummus for a snack, you know, at the end of the day. Dan is big on wine at 5 or 6, whatever. And we have a little hummus and crackers. And I have, you know, lentil soup and crusty bread for lunch, or, you know, a black bean burger, whatever. I just love beans. That's my favorite source of protein.
Yeah, well, that's a great response, and that sounds delicious. I would like to
come over to our house,
bean stew or whatever.
Dan will cook you something up.
Stew.
Yes, exactly. That's my favorite.
But the kind of truth behind it is that it is a red herring, because if you're just eating, okay, let's presume you're not just eating processed crap, but if you're just eating like random plant foods throughout the day, mindlessly, without even really paying attention, a couple bananas, some whatever, like, it's a non-issue. You will meet your protein needs. You will get all those amino acids that you're worried about will be taken care of. Yeah. Right? So the real thing, and you talk about this in the book, and I've said it many times before, the thing that we need to be sort of focused on, or we need to kind of shift this discussion towards, and is away from this issue of protein and onto fiber, because people are not protein deficient. They're eating too much protein. They're probably eating 2 to 3 times as much protein as they need, and those are the sedentary people. But I don't know what the percentage is. Maybe you know. Most people are fiber deficient. They're not eating any fiber.
90% of Americans do not get enough fiber.
Is it 90?
Yeah. So, and fiber, that's the question we should be asking each other, not where are you getting your protein, but where are you getting your fiber? Are you getting enough fiber? What are your sources of fiber?
I don't want to talk about that.
But that's the thing we should be asking each other is, you know, how are you sure you're getting enough fiber? Because fiber is like this miracle component of food, and it acts like a scrub brush, as you know, going through the body, cleaning out all the gunk and toxicity, and it keeps you feeling full, so you're not overeating with other foods, and it disperses the blood sugar, the glucose throughout the day very steadily and slowly, and so your blood sugar is good, and it's associated with lower incidences of heart disease and type 2 diabetes and cancer, all kinds of things. So the fact that most Americans aren't getting enough fiber, that's a real problem. And interestingly, plant foods, all plant foods have fiber, lots of fiber. Fiber is like bones are to animals, humans, like our bones, you know, hold everything together. So fiber is like a plant's bones. And so everything in the plant kingdom has fiber, and nothing in the plant kingdom has cholesterol. And then if you look in the other column, you look at animal protein has 0 fiber, zilch, 0, nada, nothing. And it has lots of cholesterol and lots of saturated fat. So you look at these two things and you think, what's my protein package? On one side, it's lots of fiber, none of the problems. And on the other side, it's no fiber and a lot of, you know, issues that come along with it. So you want to move away from the old sources of protein, which is animal, and toward clean protein, which tends to be plant-based.
Mm-hmm. And how do you talk about organic versus non-organic?
That's not the prime issue for me. It's not the prime issue for the book, just because a lot of people, I don't always have access to organic. And, certainly in parts of the country, if you're only, 7-Eleven is your local grocery store, and Denny's, and so you don't always have access, or you can't always afford it. But certainly, if you can afford it, definitely, and stay away from the dirty dozen that you definitely don't want to eat.
Right, the dirty dozen is the Environmental Working Group's annual list of the plant foods that are the ones you should definitely stay away from in terms of being conventionally grown versus organic.
Like strawberries,
right.
Man. They wear a hazmat suit. If those strawberries are not organic, it's like really toxic. So if I'm out, I would not eat inorganic strawberries. I would just opt out of them. But I don't worry too much about that stuff.
I think it's an exciting time right now. I think we can agree that this plant-based movement, this vegan movement, has finally sort of reached that tipping point where it's part of the mainstream discourse, and that's due in no small part to books like you've written and these documentaries that are sort of being released with, increasing frequency that have people talking about these things. But at the same time, and I've talked about this before on the show, there seems to be kind of a war for the hearts and minds of people right now. On one side, we have plant-based people like yourself and many of the doctors and nutritionists and dietitians that I've had on this program, and athletes, et cetera. And on the other side, we have this sort of ascendancy of the low-carb, high-fat / ketosis. I don't know if you can totally align those two. They have differing points of view at certain points. But that seems to be very popular right now. And I would imagine just, in your world and the circles that you kind of, navigate through, that you're hanging out with certain people that are on board with that right now. So when someone comes to you and says, oh, I lost all this weight, or I'm doing ketosis, or I'm all about that, like, how do you think about that and talk about that?
Well, it breaks my heart, number one. And number two, I'm old enough and hopefully wise enough to know that I can never change anyone's mind. And so if someone is set on doing something or eating a certain way, it's not on me to try to change them. I think someone has to be curious from their own place. So it is really unfortunate that this paleo ketosis sort of thing is on the rise, but I get that people want to be fit and they read certain science, and it seems like it makes a lot of sense. Certainly, I have brothers that are on that diet, but I would say that wellness and well-being and health is not a singular sector of the pie, which is our individual health. That's part of it, but it's also the planet. It's also the climate. It's also our land and our water and our trees and our natural preserve. So you want to look at your diet, your choices, and determine how does that not only affect me, my body, so I can understand, maybe for whatever reason you think that this is better for your body. Let's look at it and see how it does for the environment. Let's look at animal agriculture. If that's really what you want to eat, let's see what it does. And the science is pretty clear on that. There's a report called Livestock's Long Shadow undertaken by the United Nations, and they determined that livestock causes 18% of all global warming gases, and it causes land degradation and sucks up all this water usage and creates these cesspools of problems that go out into our food system and chops down rainforests so that, grazing for cattle which then releases all the climate change gases. It was revised to say, I think it caused 15% rather than 18%, but the World Bank says it caused 51% of all climate change gases. So those are serious numbers. So that means that it causes more problem for the climate than all the transportation sources put together, all the trucks and cars and planes and everything. So you want to say, okay, let's look at something that's good for my body, that's good for the land, the water, the climate, and not to be too precious, but like, let's honor these other creatures on the planet, these animals, you know. Again, I did not grow up to be a touchy-feely, tree-hugging animal lover. It's not like I popped out of the womb that way. But once you see how animals are treated, even in the best of circumstances, they cling to life. They do not want to die. They have bonds with their families. And it's just kind of disturbing. It's a shock to the conscience what's happening on a vast scale. And as countries get wealthier, like China and India, and they're seeking to eat like we eat, more protein, then it's pretty shocking what's happening. So we want to consider the whole picture, a holistic idea of health. And interestingly enough, plant-based sort of checks all those boxes.
It definitely does. I'm interested in your level of optimism about people's inherent altruism. You know what I mean? Because I think there are certain people, when they see the environmental implications of this, they're like, oh my God, this is, I cannot abide. I'm in. And other people are like, I'm just trying to pay the bills, man.
Yeah.
Whatever. Like, I can't be concerned with that.
Yeah. Well, your listeners are the former. Your community is people who are thinking about it, who are altruistic to at least some extent, probably a lot, and who are very progressive citizens of this planet. But that's why I'm a big fan of alternative meats. And like, let's have McDonald's have a veggie burger. Let's do that. Let's get clean meat passed, and let's not fight against this stuff, because that's progress. And a lot of people definitely just want something that tastes good, and it's affordable, it's available, and that's it. I know a lot of people like that myself. That's not going to change. So let's get those things out there. All those entrepreneurs who are out there working on things, let's support them. Let's make it, let's lift them up and not be so purist and, perfectionist that we all have to eat, absolutely perfectly organic and things that grow in the ground or on trees.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I am shocked at my own evolution with this, because I watched a video that I did, like this was like maybe 2 years into being plant-based, and PETA came to my house, and Lisa Lange interviewed me for a little video that they did. And at that time, I was still somebody who, like, my life had been changed dramatically by eating a plant-based diet, like 180 degree difference. Revolutionized, how I felt, how my body performed. But I was still very much of the mind that this was just about me and my personal health. And I was starting to sense, the power of advocating for this lifestyle on behalf of other people taking greater control of their own personal health. But the idea that these decisions had environmental implications, and that there were ethical considerations to be thought about, it was just not part of. I wasn't comfortable going there yet. That wasn't like my thing. And now, like, that's a huge part of how I see all of it. But I wasn't ready to hear that then, even after being a couple of years into it, right? Yeah. So I'm sensitive to people who are standing on the outside of it, and how easily that door can get shut because people don't want to be preached to. They don't want to hear about it. So on the one hand, it's like, hey man, you got to go on your own journey. Like, let's support you on your journey. And then you have to balance that against this ticking clock that we're on. Like, we're like the mudslide, like everything that's going on right now. There's a sense of urgency, I think, as well. Yeah. So I don't know where I'm heading with that. I was just
we're kind of at a fork in the road, and no pun intended, but there's, we can definitely keep as a culture going the way that we're going, and stay obsessed with protein, and the climate keeps amping up, and we keep getting angrier, and we keep getting fatter and sicker, and it can go that way. And I don't know how things turn out. Or we can go down another road, and we talk about this in the book, that if enough activists, food activists, wellness activists really get in there and empower entrepreneurs and support businesses and, talk about this stuff and change the way schools are serving lunches to kids, and we go and we talk to our employers and ask for more options, we can change the culture. I mean, that's the way things happen, but it's kind of in our hands. It's literally in our hands. It's a fork.
There's no conspiracy to repress us. I think the market just responds to demand, and we have to shift demand. Yeah. And that begins with our own personal choices, and then how we kind of carry ourselves in the world. But I think we can all agree when we look at factory farming that it's an abomination, and the way these animals are treated is just abhorrent. Like it's just there's no ethical argument to be had. It's terrible across the board in every way, shape, or form. And when you look at the dairy industry, it was news to me. I had to learn that later, like how bad that is and how awful they treat these animals. Like we're all inherently compassionate people. And I think once you are exposed to that and you see it, you realize that that our actions have an impact on whether we perpetrate that system or we overcome it. And
there's a numbness that is required, to keep your eyes shut to that and your awareness away from that, because it's 20 years ago, maybe you wouldn't really know how animals are treated, but now we all have computers, we can all see stuff, we've seen things on the news, so there's a numbness, a shut down unconsciousness that is required to not feel this stuff, and that numbness goes across in every sector of our lives. So how fully are we living in any sector of our lives if we're shut down in one area? I think it creates a dissonance. If you have some awareness, however conscious or unconscious that awareness is, and then to act in contradiction to that awareness creates like an unhealthy dissonance in your body and in your mind and in your spirit. And that's like a low grade, like unhealthy thing to walk around with. Yeah. It sounds weird. I mean, it's kind of like a spiritual malady, I think. It is. But when you develop that awareness and you align your actions with that more compassionate value that I think we all have inherently, as part of who we are as human beings, there's kind of a lightness and a freedom that comes with that. Yeah. And that's definitely been my experience. But I think the most common occurrence is the well-intentioned person who's like, okay, Kathy, I hear you. Like, I get it. Like, I'm going to try. And then they try and life gets busy and they fall off the wagon and then they beat themselves up because they know like, oh, I don't like the way those animals are treated, or I know what it's doing to the planet and I don't feel good, but like, it's just too hard. Or the social, I think it's the social structures that make it difficult for people. Like, oh, I'm going out to dinner with my friends, or I'm going to a party, or I'm going to whatever. Like, they don't want to stick out like a sore thumb. Yeah. They don't know how to navigate the social landmines that are part and parcel of trying to do something a little bit different than their peers. And that's something you talk about in the book. So, how do you speak to that or try to help people figure out a strategy that allows them to, adhere to this commitment that they've made to themselves without becoming like a social pariah? Yeah. Well, my favorite way of approaching anything is to lean into it and to just give yourself the space and time to just find your way. Don't lean forever. Don't take forever to lean, but lean into it so that you find your way, so you're not going to show up to a dinner or a holiday and starve. You want to just give yourself some time to figure things out, like, how do I prepare? We've got a lot of tips and tricks tricks in the book, and how to, have a snack before you go out if you don't think your relatives are going to have anything, or how to stop by the grocery store, bring some leftovers so that you can bring something to a dinner party or a holiday, so you feel like you're part of everything. But I think you really hit on something that's very important, and that is social isolation. You don't want to stick out like a pariah. You kind of want to be part of the community. Mm-hmm. Actually, I grew up very attached to my traditions and my, friends and community and stuff like that. But once I started learning about it, I was super excited. I didn't really care. I was very happy to be an oddball, and actually kind of proud of it. I'm like, oh my God, I love that I'm in on this early, and it's still early. I mean, to be in on this now, you're still early. But I know, people who have lots of resources and they still felt like they were isolated. So I think it's really important to get your community happening. And I think that's what you're doing. That's what Dan is doing with Blue Zones. I think it's what we do on Instagram and Facebook. And so you see that there are a whole lot of people who think this way, who want to make it happen so that you don't feel like you're an oddball. You definitely are out front. You're in the front curve of this movement, but you're still part of a community and you're not alone. And then once you see all the great food and you start entertaining and you have friends over, I would say fully 75% of my friends are meat eaters, but when they come to my house, they have great food, and they always return saying, you know what, I can do this. I can eat less meat. And that's how change happens, because we normalize it. People who are eating this way, we normalize it. That's why I kind of believe in the 2% rule. Like, if there's 2% of anything, just let it go. Don't be annoying. If you're in a restaurant, you don't want to quiz the waiter. Are you sure? Are you absolutely sure there's no egg in this bread? It's like you're not doing any favor to anyone. You're just making the whole plant-based thing seem stringent and annoying. Yeah. So go with it. Do the best that you can and serve great food. And once you find some people to follow on Instagram and Facebook that we're posting great pictures of recipes. I know you guys have amazing cheeses at your house, and I love coming to your house. And I'm sure if people come to your house and have cheese and crackers, they're like, oh my God, I can still have my cheese and crackers. I didn't realize that. Yeah,
they're like, they're like, what? There's no dairy. They can't believe it. They can't believe it. But in fairness, everyone knows now. Everyone knows when they go to your house, they're going to have a plant-based meal. Similarly at our house. I think somebody who's just beginning, I sort of analogize it to when you're newly sober, you're like, oh my God, I have to go to a wedding in 6 months.
What am I going to do?
What am I going to do? How am I going to go to a wedding or a rehearsal or a bachelor party, whatever, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
You future trip. Yeah. And you're like, that's impossible. I can't do it. So you either don't begin, or you just get so caught up in this future event that hasn't even occurred that you talk yourself out of what you're capable of. And I think it's very similar with this. How am I going to go home for Thanksgiving or wedding or whatever, whatever it is, because people really get uncomfortable with having to be that person who's sticking out. Right? And they don't want to make a fuss or they just, I don't know, or they're like, I'm going to starve or whatever it is.
Yeah. I just go and I bring, for Thanksgiving, I bring some Beyond Meat or Gardein or something like that. And I pop it in the oven if I'm going to.
How dare you?
Dan's house or something like that. I'll just pop it in the oven, and I always bring more. Than just for me or just for Dan, because inevitably people want to try it and then they love it. They fall in love with it. It happens every single time I bring stuff, and it's like people will say, "Oh wow, I didn't realize it tasted this good," and then they're going to fold it in to their diets. Because that's a doorway. The doorway is tasting good, feeling part of things. And I can't tell you how many people say, if I knew I could eat this way, I'd eat it that way every day. If things tasted this good, I'd eat that way every day. And guess what? Things can taste that good every day. So
I think it also involves some kind of social strategies around how you talk about it and the kind of love that you carry, with it into that environment, because especially if it's family, like it's loaded, right? Like your mom always made this thing for Thanksgiving or Christmas or Easter or whatever holiday or whatever, you're just going home. And for you to bring something else in can be interpreted as a rejection of that person. Like you don't love me. You're rejecting me because you're rejecting my food, which seems insane, but that's a very real thing.
Sure.
And so I think you need to have strategies for approaching that so that there's communication, healthy communication, so that people aren't misinterpreting those social cues as that rejection, and more about I'm just doing this for me, or downplaying it, hey, I just thought I'd whatever, being low key about it or whatever. I think that in any situation you think what would feel good to me? If someone were going to come to my house, what would feel good to me? How would I talk to that? And I think that that's the way I talk to other people. So not judgmental, just really curious, and just say, oh my God, I love your green beans so much. They're so good. I can't wait to pile on in that, or your apple pie, or whatever it is. And just say, I'm eating plant-based these days. I don't want you to have to waste a piece of fish or a steak on me. So I'm going to bring my own, but I love, just be complimentary and be so
open
happy
and curious.
To come. Can't wait to see you.
Yeah, totally. And I tell you one thing I do these days is I don't bring wine or flowers anymore. I always bring my favorite plant-based food, plant-based proteins, because I think that's an exposure. Because I can't tell you how many people I've walked through the grocery store because they're like, I don't know what to get. I mean, so you bring them stuff this is what it looks like. This is what the Beyond Burgers look like. This is what the field roast sausages look like. Here's a bag of lentils and a bunch of recipes. Here's my favorite cookbook or my favorite book. So these are ways of advocating in a joyful way. You're not pushing it down anyone's throat, but when you go to dinner, it's okay, I cooked this up and here's the recipe. It came from this book in case you like it, Yeah,
it's cool. I like that. Let's talk about the clean meat stuff. Have you tried Memphis meats or any of these things? Would you try
I haven't, but I sure would.
You would?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would definitely have a meatball. That's real meat. If it was clean meat, and clean meat, is meat that is real animal cells, grown from the cells into real animal flesh, but no slaughter. So it is cruelty-free, no environmental footprint, definitely not as healthy as lentils. I'm not saying it's healthy, but it's clean. And so it's clean on the conscience, of course, because the animals aren't hurt, and it's clean on the environment. So yeah, I would definitely have a meatball. Would you?
I don't know. Paul Shapiro tried it. That guy's been vegan vegetarian forever, right? Yeah. He's but he's writing a book about it. He's going to try it, ethical vegan vegetarian. I don't know. It's a good question. I'm sure that eventuality will present itself.
I would.
Clearly, we're not the market for that. I actually got freaked out by the Impossible Burger.
It tasted so much like meat.
I don't really like it. I think it's great that it exists, and I think that it's an important product. That be made available for people. But for me, it just weirded me out.
Too meaty.
And so I can't imagine what
Tastes
a real
bloody.
meatball.
I know
it would be, and I think. Maybe just out of curiosity, I would, but it's not oh man, that's going to be my jam. There's no way.
Yeah. But man, it's a game changer. It is a game changer when all these food suppliers are, putting in Hot Pockets, and they're supplying schools and fast food places. It's like when, electricity was discovered. Or kerosene was discovered. Oh, we don't need whale oil anymore. And overnight, whale oil became obsolete. That's what's going to happen. When this clean meat gets up to speed, there ain't going to be any need for animals. And that's going to be a game changer.
Yeah, my hope is that we'll look back on this era and think, how barbaric was that we had this whole system set up to raise these animals and torture them, and the impact that had on the planet and the environment, and it doesn't make sense, right? When there's this alternative that is so much more environmentally sustainable, and clearly there is I guess there is I mean, there is a small ethical quandary. It's sort of like a stem cell argument. Like, okay, well, what is this that we're eating? There's certainly an ick factor that we're going to have to get over.
But there's a bigger ick factor if you look at the slaughterhouses.
Yeah, if you like, people are like, oh, it's lab grown, like that's just weirds me out and it's gross.
Yeah.
But like, all right, well, but you're cool with like all the hormones and these animals that are like walking around in their own fecal matter.
Totally, and scalding and peeling off the skin and cutting off the hooves, and I mean it's gnarly, it's gross. Talk about an ick factor. All you have to do is Google factory farmed meat and just look at a slaughterhouse video, and that is like so full of ick, so but there's a reason
there'll be an acclimation period to this.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I have a hard time imagining that I'm going to sit in the back seat of a car that's going to drive itself, but clearly that's going to happen.
It's happening. Exactly. This is happening. And the clean meat can't happen fast enough. Personally, I don't think I would consume it regularly at all. I'm definitely going to taste it because on principle, I want to say, hey, I have no problem with this at all. But like you, I've lost my taste for meat. And I actually love the taste of plant-based food, and the simpler, the better. I can kind of eat like a peasant, bowl of rice and beans and some local vegetables, and I'm so happy. It doesn't take much. But then every once in a while, I need a burger, I need a hot dog. We went to an event last night, and they had one of those food trucks outside of the event that sometimes they serve burgers and hot dogs. And I was like, oh, damn, because I've got the munchies, it's been a long night and I want to have something. And lo and behold, they had all these veggie burgers and hot dogs and everything, and got to eat. I got to dig in just like everybody else. And it felt a little wicked, certainly not healthy, but it was fun.
It's amazing how many places have the Beyond Burger now, burger places all over the place. Most places now have some kind of veggie patty option.
Yeah.
And that was not the case even a couple of years ago.
No, it's changed so much so fast. The world is definitely changing. And I think we as food activists, we have to embrace that and empower people to try this stuff, feel good about it, not shame them because it's got a little oil in it or, it's a little bit processed or whatever. It's the better. So we want to fight for the better.
Let's talk about Bruce and GFI.
Yeah.
So Good Food Institute, you're like on the board of directors or advisors?
I'm on the board of directors at the Good Food Institute.
Yeah. You go way back with Bruce, right?
Bruce and I have been friends for, over a decade now. And he's always been someone I looked up to so much. He's so brilliant. I mean, whenever I needed something like an insight about something or fact check or what do you think about this or what's your opinion on this, Bruce is sort of the sage. He kind of knows everything. So we were having dinner at Crossroads, I think a couple of years ago, probably 2 or 3 years ago, and we were talking about clean meat and what's coming and protein and everything. And I said, you know what, Bruce, you should write a book called The Future of Protein. And he said, that's a great idea. Why don't you do it with me? And I was like, no, I'm tired. I don't want to write
20 books.
I don't want to write right now. You don't need me. Just do this. He goes, well, I'm not going to do it without you. And I said, well, how about I'll just work on a proposal. Let's see how it comes out. And we sent it in to my agent, and so that's how we wrote the book together. But he is just about the smartest, loveliest human being and the most hardworking human being you've ever seen in your life. I mean, I get emails from him at all hours where he's doing, work and just empowering people to help these entrepreneurs so that they can create. That's what Good Food Institute does, actually.
So let's talk about what they're doing and maybe I had Bruce on. It was a year ago, maybe what's going on more recently with GFI and what your involvement is. Yeah.
Well, so they are going into universities. They're teaching clean meat courses. They're teaching clean protein courses. They're going into food systems. They're supporting entrepreneurs, sort of like incubators, really helping people formulate their business plans, get funding, get it out there. So they're all about moving the world toward more sustainable protein. They're amazing.
And so what is do you have you don't have a daily involvement with them, right? But you're just sort of like an advisor to them.
I'm an advisor.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I'm just excited to be part of it, to tell you the truth, because there's no other organization that's doing this, and they're all about science. They're all about food science. They're not precious about anything. It's not an animal welfare organization, in which I love animal welfare organizations. They are hiring lobbyists to support these companies. So it's a kind of a game-changing organization that I'm really proud to be part of.
Right. And the big players right now in this space are Hampton Creek, or they just rebranded their name, right? Are they called Just now? Did they change the name?
Oh, I didn't. Yeah, they did.
I'm not sure. I think they did. I think it's called Just.
Yeah.
Beyond Meat, obviously. Impossible Foods, Memphis Meats. I know there's a number of other.
There's a lot of Hungry
a couple
Planet
case studies
is
in the
fantastic. Book. Yeah, there's and Tofurkey that's been around for a while, Field Roast that's been around for a while, the early adapters, the Gardein. Yeah, there's just so many good ones, and good people who really have a mission. Like, they have a purpose-driven mission that they want to make this world better. They want to make human health better and the environment better. So it's exciting to support them.
What was the most surprising? Like, you've been at this for a long time. Like, you've been around the block in the vegan world. But in the process of writing this book, was there something you came across that surprised you, that you didn't know, or that you learned that you thought you didn't realize going into this process of writing this book?
I didn't realize how big of an issue protein was. I did not realize. I mean, I knew it was an obsession. I didn't know to the extent that we are consuming protein. The vast amount of animal protein that we're consuming, and the massive fallout from it. So it just feels all the more critical to me that we address this protein issue, that we really parse it apart and talk about it, and we become activists. So this is not even about just changing, because I think a lot of your listeners are already on board. This is about this book being a tool for activism. Like, whenever someone says, I don't know, I need my protein, I don't feel good unless I have my protein, here's a tool that you can use, because it is an ongoing problem, and it's not going away. So we have to take it into our own hands and become protein activists, clean protein activists.
But what if you don't want to be an activist? Like, people that are new, they're like, I don't want to be an activist. I just want to feel a little bit better. Yeah.
Well, be an activist for yourself. And, most people, if you have a partner, if you have a child, or just to make it easy on yourself. You're an activist even if you just want to feel good about yourself. You just want more options in your local restaurants or in your employees' cafeteria. It requires a certain level of activism. I was just down in Florida with my mom, and she has a local pub, that her condo people go to. And there's nothing to eat that, I could eat. And so for me, in that moment of activism, I went and bought some plant-based burgers and plant-based cheese, and we went down and we sat at the bar and had a beer and said, totally, I'll pay for everything, the regular burger price, but would you mind just using my burgers, throw this on the grill? And they made me an amazing cheeseburger. So that's activism. So even if it's not like, I need to change this pub and I need to, change my community, it's activism to make it easier for me, for us as individuals to eat that way. It requires that we sort of speak out and talk to our local restaurateurs, talk to our local businesses, grocery stores, request things. That's what it takes, that consumer demand.
Where did this all start for you?
I don't know. I mean,
yeah, you do.
I definitely didn't grow up this way. I love to eat. I'm kind of, I don't know. I started just asking questions. I wrote 2 books on relationships, how to be more conscious in relationships, if you didn't have a relationship, how to find one, and if you had one, how to make it more conscious and deep. And then when I started researching another book, I was applying that consciousness, that being awake and aware to different sectors of my life. And I realized that I didn't have any consciousness around food. I had had little glimpses here and there, but not enough to make me go deep. And so I thought, well, I should know where my food comes from and then make conscious choices. So I started looking into it, watching videos, reading accounts, looking at undercover investigations, and I became deeply uncomfortable with what I was seeing. And I thought, well, Kath, you're a hypocrite. You know, if you just keep eating the way you're eating and you're writing about waking up and being conscious, you're a hypocrite. And so I thought, if I'm going to be a writer who talks about this stuff, I have to really challenge myself to be someone who doesn't eat that way.
Were you like, oh, fuck?
Totally. Are you kidding me?
Like,
oh my God.
It wasn't like awesome. You were like, oh man.
No, it was like, oh yeah, it was the ultimate inconvenient truth. I did not want to give up my favorite foods at all. And I'm kind of someone who loves food. I really love food, and I love tasty food. I didn't want to just be sort of this very sanctimonious person where I'm eating a bowl of rice and some beans or something. So I just thought, I don't know how I'm going to do it. I'm just going to lean into it. And in the meantime, I had a dog. Her name was Lotzi. I loved her like a kid. I don't have children, so I love my dogs. She was on her back and I was rubbing her belly, and her legs were just sort of, she was just so joyful, and I could swear she was smiling and she was wagging her tail. And in that moment, I just really saw her as an animal, not unlike any other animal, not unlike a pig or a chicken or a fish or a cow or anything. And the idea that I could send that dog, my dog, into a slaughterhouse, the fear that she would feel, the absolute terror that she would feel really got me and made me connect the dots. And so that's how it kind of started. I for the love of my dog, really. The love of my dog.
And here you are. I mean, did you imagine that you would become this face of the vegan movement?
No, I don't think I'm the face of the vegan movement.
Well, you're one of the faces.
I'm one of the faces. And there are many faces, and I'm proud to be part of that village, as it were.
The vegan mafia.
Yeah. Yeah. But
it's definitely there's definitely a vegan mafia.
You think so?
Oh yeah.
I don't know.
You're part of it.
I don't think so.
I think there is.
I don't know. I mean, I have so many friends who eat meat that, I love, and we sit around and scoop and gossip, and, we just put that in a compartment, but they are changing, I will say. I mean, it's hard for people to be around me and not eat the food that I love, because that's what I'm serving at my house, and I make sure that it tastes really good. And so it is. And, we go out to fun restaurants, and, I'll make sure we go to Craig's, so that they can have chicken or steak and I can have my spaghetti squash primavera, and they see that I'm eating delicious food, and I'm having the pizza, but it's got vegan cheese on it. And it tastes just like their pizza. So it kind of influences them. So little by little, my community is changing too. But the surprising thing is that this is my calling, which I had no idea that this is my calling.
I think that when you kind of canvas the whole vegan movement, there are all different kinds of voices, and they come in different shapes and sizes. Your voice is definitely one of inclusion, of celebrating the small victories, and kind of providing this accessible welcome mat for people. Like, you're relatable. People can see themselves in you. Because you're not a hippie and you kind of live in the modern world. But there are all different other kinds of. There's very hardcore voices. There are sanctimonious voices. There are punk rock type voices who are shouting, like all of that. And I think it's all great. We need all those different kinds of voices, because everybody has a different entry point. They're going to connect with, if they can't connect with you, they'll connect with, somebody else. But I think within all of that noise, there's a lack of cohesion. I think that I think ultimately on some level like handicaps the movement from moving forward. And we were kind of talking about this a little bit before the podcast. It's similar to national politics. Like the Republicans seem to have their talking points all in order. They know what they're going to say. They fall into line. And they get shit done that way. And the Democrats are fighting with each other and they can't get it together. And so ultimately they end up hamstringing themselves from the progress that they probably, all seek if they could just get past themselves, right?
Yeah, we are our own worst enemy. We fracture and splinter off in so many different ways in this movement. And I think that's really one of the most unfortunate things because we need to support each other. And maybe I'm not as hardcore as the next person, but I support that person because, like you said, there are different entry points. And I also love that voice. Part of me just, I want to lift up that voice. It's great. And then some other people, are all about being more moderate even than me. And I support that too. I think it's really important that we're all deciding that we want to move forward. And forward movement means away from eating animal food and toward plant-based food. There's like hardcore, there's little by little, and I think if we can just support each other and opt for the better, it's not the perfect, we'll do so much better. But we got to stop splintering off and fighting because these are serious times.
Yeah. We got to get Oprah plant-based.
Wow.
Are you working on her? Come on. How are you going to make that happen?
Oh, yeah, I can do that.
Because she can move culture.
Yeah.
You know that, right?
Yeah. No, but she did. She did my vegan cleanse. She did She did a vegan cleanse and she did a month-long thing. She challenged her whole company, Harper, to eat vegan, which was super successful. So she's done a lot, and she's certainly talked about it. She said she'd never be unconscious about eating animals again. So the awareness is there.
Right. Well, she had that whole thing with the whole lawsuit with the beef industry over who's the guy he's the last scene of Cowspiracy.
Yeah, the
cattle
mad
farmer.
cowboy.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, when I went on Oprah the first time to talk about this stuff, all of her producers said, do not bring up the animal stuff versus vegan stuff or plant-based, whatever you want to call it. And I was like, okay, I can talk about meditation. I can talk about, all kinds of other stuff, relationships and consciousness at work. I can talk about all of that stuff. And Oprah, as Oprah is, went straight to the heart of the matter. And she wanted to talk about it because I think all of her producers were afraid for her, having gone through that traumatic experience with the meat industry. They didn't think she'd want to talk about it, but she did. She was curious, and she knows that this is a real rising tide that is only getting stronger. I can't speak for her, but certainly I know that she's interested and she's well aware of stuff. So
yeah, it's cool. All right, well, we got to wrap this up.
Oh, I could talk forever.
But we can keep talking for a little while longer. What else do you want to talk about?
I don't know. I mean,
How's Dan doing? He's
good. He's good. We're going to Davos. He's going to speak at Davos. So
it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it'll be fun. We're going to go. We have a friend over there who lives in Lugano who is a vintner. So he has fantastic vegan wine and fantastic organic wines that are biodynamic, and he's completely plant-based. So he has amazing food. So we're going to go over and eat and drink ourselves silly.
That's cool. You guys really do live the Blue Zone's lifestyle. Like Dan, one thing I've noticed is, Dan's very careful to not overcommit and make sure that he builds in, the time that he needs to recalibrate and enjoy his friends. Yeah. And that's something I have a hard time putting into practice. I've noticed this year, not burned out, but
you work hard.
I take on too much, and I'm trying to get better at saying no to stuff, but finding the time to hey, I'm just going to go hang out with my friends. Like, I'm like, I can't do that. I got this. I got that. I got this. Blah, 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 blah.
No, but life is so short. You never know. Look at these mudslides. I mean, it could end in a split second. Part of it is where we live. We have houses all around us. All you have to do is walk outside and you're going to run into somebody, and that's, kind of a nice automatic social situation. You don't necessarily have to have dinner with someone, but you run into someone in the street and you have a conversation. So I think that naturally lends itself to that kind of living situation, the proximity to other people. So you have an automatic social thing. And then someone says, oh, you want to just, hey, I'm going to go hiking. Do you want to go with me? Or things just kind of pop up. Yeah. So you live in a beautiful place, I know, but it's more like isolated.
There's nobody, like I have to make an effort.
You have to make more of an effort.
And that effort involves quite a bit of driving. So for me to just like, hey, let's have lunch.
Yeah.
Like that's a 4.5 hour endeavor for me. It's like exactly. It's like, I can't do that,
So come and move.
And then I'll get like, oh, well, come over to my house. Well, that's too far. I'm not driving all the way out there.
I get it. Totally.
You know what I mean?
Totally.
Dan's like, come up, hang out in Santa Barbara. And I was like, that sounds amazing. And then I'm like, but I don't know how I can make that work,
I know.
I'm like, I could do that, but then there's no podcast happening this week, So I'm trying to balance that.
I really take your equipment up to our house, and we're going to be gone for a couple weeks. Take our house.
I'm going to go live at your house while you're gone.
Meet our neighbors. You'll see, it's very social up there.
Yeah,
you walk outside, and people want to know how you're doing, what you're up to.
The farmers market there is insane.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. Yeah, it's really good. But that day-to-day interaction is really nice. And by the way, our neighbors, they come over. We have happy hour. We're totally into happy hour.
Right.
And we'll just, every once in a while, we'll just put out a text to the neighbors, hey, you guys want to come over for happy hour? And we'll have some delicious, cheese, whether it's, Srimati cheese or if it's Kite Hill or something, and, hummus. And it's like, share the love. Like, this is our little community. Like, let's be social. And it's important. It's really important. You got to play more. You got to enjoy more.
I know it intellectually, and then putting it into practice. It's like, and I wouldn't characterize myself as a workaholic, but I'm definitely driven, and I think I've been thinking about, the ego piece in that, like, okay, what are you really doing? And like, what is this all about? You know what I mean? Like, where is your heart? Like, take an honest inventory of where you're at. And so I've been doing that, and that's been kind of an interesting, insightful, journey into the soul. And as part of kind of that exercise, I watched this documentary, Jim and Andy. Have you seen that documentary yet? Oh man, you got to watch it.
Really?
It's a documentary about Jim Carrey during the course of making the Andy Kaufman movie.
Oh yeah,
Man on the Moon.
Oh wow.
And it's fascinating.
Oh, I'm gonna.
And basically, he recognized that like this was the opportunity of a lifetime for him to portray this person who had meant so much to him, and he decided to go all in. And and it's sort of like he hired a crew to follow him around during the process of making this movie, like a behind the scenes crew. And he approaches it from a method perspective, but to ask him, he would say, no, I wasn't doing like a method acting job. Andy literally walked into my body, and I became Andy and Tony Clifton. And I just exuded that, his psyche through the process of making this movie in a very kind of spiritual way. And it's unbelievable to watch.
Oh, wow.
And how disruptive he was to everybody, because he never broke character, and he was this obnoxious, this obnoxious person. And to be frank, like Jim Carrey's never been the same. He's never been the same since that. And the footage of this is interspliced with a very long interview with Jim in current day, in which he reflects over the course of his career. From somebody who was very ambitious, he wrote himself that $10 million check and then achieved that. Very much a master at manifesting in his life. To come to this place on the other side of it to say, I'm here to tell you that like being rich and getting everything you want is not the solution to whatever ails you. And he's been on this deep spiritual quest to find peace within himself. And it's very interesting. And it's made me reflect on my own journey and the attachment like that I have, like the ambition that I have attached to what I do. And it's like, it's made me realize how I have at times undervalued like those things that are the most important. And the whole point in saying that is that I notice in you and in the way Dan carries himself that he's not unaware of that, and that he does prioritize that. And I can see that in, who he is and how he behaves and how he carries himself and how genuine he is with everybody that he meets.
Well, that's true. He is. But, I would say give yourself a break, because you wouldn't have achieved what you've achieved if you didn't have that drive and ambition and, just that crazy sort of dedication and devotion to whatever you were doing, whether it was the Ultraman challenge or starting your podcast and, growing that. I think it takes a certain amount of that, but then you get to a level and it's like, okay, I can actually now fold in some meaningful time with friends. I can actually do stuff that's not super, important. I can just kind of have fun. I can just mess around, because that's when the ideas come, when you just work. And I said in my book and in the acknowledgments, I said to Dan, let's just go sit on the balcony and drink wine for a little while, because it's like, I've been working really hard, and writing takes a lot of energy. So when you just give yourself the permission, I don't mean really like we're going to sit on the balcony and drink wine, but I mean metaphorically, let's take a break. And that's when the ideas come. That's when the inspiration comes, when you're not looking for it, when you're just daydreaming. Or my thing is dancing. I love dancing, by myself or at a party or whatever, not in any professional way, not in a way that I'm following steps, but like just have fun, just relax. And that's when the next step shows up.
Itself.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to take your advice.
Okay. You will have fun.
Yes. I promise you.
Damn it.
I'm going to let go.
Yeah. Come to our house. Come to our house.
I will.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, we do have to wrap this up, but maybe you can leave us with some helpful tools or advice for somebody who's like, okay, it's 2018. I've listened to 300 of Rich's podcasts, and now I'm fine. Like, Kathy put me over the top. Like, I'm ready to go. Like, what do I do? Tell me where to go. What should I? Okay, protein, whatever. What's next? I would say start crowding out some of your favorite meals. Don't make it hard on yourself. Just start with your regular fare. So if you're used to having a burrito, beef burrito, do a black bean burrito. If you're used to having, pizza with sausage, try a plant-based pizza with sausage and, vegan cheese. Just try to sort of crowd out the stuff that you're used to having with a plant-based alternative, and do a smoothie. Smoothies are really good. They're so easy too. You just throw in some frozen fruits, some frozen vegetables, some flax seeds, maybe some protein powder. See how good you feel, and just not to worry about doing this stuff perfectly. Just lean into it, get started, crowd out the old stuff with the cleaner versions of the proteins, and you'll find your way. I hear you. It's good advice. All right. Well, it's all in the new book, Clean Protein. You actually have like a massive recipe section in here too. So 40 recipes. Yeah, it's like it really does like condense everything down. You're like, here's food policy. Here's everything that's going into how they market these animal products to you. Here's what's going on environmentally. Here's what's going on with the clean meat movement. Here's how plant proteins impact your body versus animal proteins, and you go through all the various diseases, cancer, obesity, type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's even, which we didn't even talk about. It's great. I think it's going to be super helpful for people. It's a great like entry point to kind of step into this and go, oh, here's all your questions answered in one place. So good job. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you, Rich. Thank you. Love chatting with you. Awesome. So if you want to connect with Kathy, at Kathy Freston on Twitter and Instagram, is that the best place? Instagram. And your website? Yep, kathyfreston.com. Awesome. Anything else? Thank
you. Gratitude.
Have fun in Switzerland. That'll be cool.
We will.
Right? Have a glass of wine for me.
Thank you.
All right.
We will.
All right, Kathy. Peace.
Cheers.
Lance.